Hi guys, this is Miss Igo. Welcome to my classroom. Today we're going to be talking about finding the slope of a line. The slope of a line is basically the measure of the slant of the line. So when we're talking about the slope of the line, we're wanting to know how slanted the line is, basically. Another way that slope is referred to is rise over run. So we count how much the line rises in comparison to how far it runs. When we're doing this, we're looking for the place where our line crosses, for lack of better terms, the little crisscrosses or the crosshairs. So in our graph, you can see that every place that our horizontal and vertical lines cross, we have little crisscrosses. So we're looking for where our line crosses at exactly the middle of those. So if you'll notice, in between these, it's not exactly on our little crisscrosses. And sometimes whenever you're trying to graph a line, they'll give you points to make it easier, or dots to make it easier to try to count your slope. So in this one, we have these dots, and so we're going to go from one dot to the other dot. It doesn't matter if you go from a higher one to a lower one, or a lower one to a higher one. As long as you reduce your fraction at the end, you will always get the same slope. So let's go from this bottom dot to the top dot. And again, we're going to count our rise over run. Well, as we're traveling from one dot to the other, we have to stay on our lines. So imagine those being roads. We can't cross the ditches. We have to stay on the roads to get from one dot to the other. So if I start at this bottom dot and I travel up, I would travel up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I rose 5 spaces. And now I'm going to run 1, 2, 3 spaces. So that would be 5 over 3. As long as I'm going up or to the right, my number is positive. So let me just show you. If I go from the top dot to the bottom dot, I always do my rise first. So that means up or down first. So if I'm going from my top dot to my bottom dot, I would rise 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces. But because I'm going down, that's a negative 5. And then I would go to the left 1, 2, 3 spaces. So again, if I go up and to the right or to the right, it's positive. If I go down or to the left, it's negative. So this would be a negative, I rose a negative 5 over negative 3. But a negative divided by a negative is positive. So that would give me a positive 5 over 3. And as you see, I get the same slope no matter what direction I travel from dot to dot. In this next example, they didn't put dots for me in order for me to find the slope. So I'll have to find my own places where my line crosses the little crisscrosses. Well, it's crossing here, 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 at all of these crisscrosses, right here in the middle. So I can travel from any dot to any other dot to find my slope. Let's just go from this dot to this dot. All right, so if I do that, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 up, or I rose 3. And then I'm running 1, 2, 3. So that's 3 over 3, which reduces to 1 over 1, or I can just say 1. Okay, so let's say instead if I went from this dot to this dot. Well, I rise 1 and I run 1. So I rose 1, I ran 1, and so that still gives me a 1. So as I said, it doesn't matter which dot we go to or from. As long as we reduce our fraction, we're going to get the same slope. Okay, here's another graph where they did not mark our points for us, but it looks like it's crossing right here, right here, right here. Those are a few places where it's crossing the little crosshairs. So we're going to travel from one to the next dot. I'm just going to go from this bottom one to this middle one. And if I do, I'm going to rise 1, 2 spaces, and then I'm going to run 1, 2, 3 spaces. But I'm going to the left, so that's a -3. I rose up, so it's a +2. I went to the left, that's a -3. So my rise over run, or my slope, is 2 over -3. A positive divided by a negative is a negative, so my slope is a -2 over 3, or 2/3. Let me go from this top dot to this middle dot. If I do that, to travel again on my roads, I'm going to go down 1, 2. I'm going down, so that makes it negative. And then to the right, 1, 2, 3. To the right, that's positive, so that's a positive. So that gives me a -2 over +3, which is still a -2/3. I want to point out something. Whenever we're finding the slope of a line, if our line is falling or going down as we travel from left to right, our slope should be negative, which it is in this case. And if you'll notice, in our first and second slopes, our line was going up from left to right, or rising from left to right, which gave us a positive slope. So that's one way you can check yourself whenever you're finding the slope of a line. If your line is rising from left to right, your slope should be positive. If your line is falling from left to right, your slope should be negative. This line isn't falling or rising. This line is vertical. So let's figure out what the slope of this line is. Again, we don't have any dots, so let's see where it's going through the crosshairs. And it's going through all of these points here. So it doesn't matter what we choose. We can choose any of these points. So let's go with, let me mark a couple of them. Let's go with this point here and this point here. Okay, so if I travel from this dot to this dot, I'm going to rise 1, 2, 3. So I rise a +3. And then, again, to get from this dot to this dot, I don't run to the left or to the right. I only rise. So that means my run is 0. Well, anytime we have a fraction with a 0 in the denominator, we say that this fraction is undefined. Therefore, our slope is also undefined. The slope of any vertical line is going to be undefined. Here we have a horizontal line. Again, we can go from any dot to any other dot, and all of these points is a place where our line is crossing the little crosshairs. So I'm going to travel from this dot to this dot. And if I do, I'm going to rise 0. I'm not going up or down in order to travel from one dot to the other. So my rise, in this case, is 0. And then I'm going to run 1, 2. Okay, so my rise is 0, my run is 2. If I have a 0 divided by anything, that's 0. So the slope of this line is 0. And the slope of any horizontal line is also going to be 0. And that's how we find the slope of a line. Thank you for watching.